Welcome back. Well, last week, a coronial inquest into the suicide of a 17-year-old boy who'd been severely bullied at work found that the employer was not liable. The findings have raised important issues, however, of how employers handle situations where employees do not report bullying occurring. Workplace law specialist Joydeep Hor of People and Culture Strategies joins me now to discuss how employers can handle bullying when victims don't speak out. It's a sensitive topic, certainly the case that we saw last week, Joydeep. Just to begin with, how big a problem realistically is this, do you think, in workplaces?
I think it's important, good afternoon James, to appreciate that the whole issue and nomenclature and labelling of bullying in Australian workplaces continues to be at extraordinary levels. How many of the actual labelled or alleged instances of workplace bullying in workplaces are actually real is a different question altogether, but certainly the number of people who feel that they have been bullied in Australian workplaces is at record high numbers.
Yes.
The specific sub-challenge within this, and one that really comes to the fore in the light of that case last week and the coronial findings, of course a tragic set of circumstances on anyone's reckoning, is what do you do as an employer when no one is actually utilising the policies and procedures that you might have within your organisation, that you might be promulgating, and they're actually keeping these factual instances and details to themselves for whatever reason. And I think what we know is that in some industries, perhaps more so than others, it is quite common that people will not speak up, they will not complain because of the fear that they have for what the consequences might be for them as a result of so complaining.
I think that's a really interesting point. I suppose then, looking at it from an employer perspective, what can they do if bullying is taking place but they're not aware of it because it's not being reported?
Yeah, so we're working with employers on a regular basis in terms of these kinds of issues, not just from a legal point of view, but from a cultural point of view. A lot of employers will come to us and they'll say, well, look, we're hearing some things about issues that might be going on, but no one's made any formal complaint, and all we really have is gossip. Therefore, it doesn't fit within our paradigm to look into it, and therefore we won't. And what we would be saying to those employers is, well, let's think this through. Let's assume the worst and that these allegations or the things that you've heard are in fact occurring, and there is a very serious consequence. Suicide, of course, would be at one extreme, but there can be lesser, quite serious consequences. How do you think you will justify, whether it's legally or ethically, your lack of action in relation to it when you had some notice that these things might have been occurring in your organisation, which has led me to give the advice, albeit that some might think that it's problematic in application, that you should, as an employer, even be responding to gossip. Because in your worst case scenario, if you take the steps to make the inquiries and you rule it out, well, there's no harm that's been done, so long as you conduct that investigation in an appropriate manner. If you don't do anything about it, the consequences for your employer brand, and far worse, potentially for employees, could be extraordinarily deleterious.
What then can employers do? What can they put in place? What steps can they take in order to make sure that employees feel comfortable, feel able to come forward with instances of bullying?
I think firstly, the employer's got to be very clear that they're not just paying lip service to appropriate workplace behaviour within their organisations. Regular training, regular communications about zero tolerance approach to bullying is absolutely critical, and then actually following through with it when there is an opportunity to show that you take these things seriously. There's nothing worse for an employer or an organisation culturally when they go to the trouble of having policies and even doing some training and other things, but yet when someone makes a complaint, and even if it's found to be validated, the employer seems to be sweeping it under the carpet or not acting in accordance with its policies. This kind of cultural change, and we need to be very clear that we're talking about significant cultural change in some Australian workplaces and industries, is not something that's going to happen overnight. It's something that may well take years, but employers have got to start somewhere.
And the culture, I imagine, is crucial, having the right culture. And from that perspective then, How do you, as an employer, actually create that, foster, if you like, the right anti-bullying culture?
Well, you know, James, what we find very interesting is often with a lot of organisations who we're working with, what we hear is that bullying is only addressed at lower levels in the organisation as a no-no, but on leadership teams and within upper levels, it's a free-for-all. And I think that's one of the biggest problems and acts of hypocrisy, if you like, that organisations will need to face into. If they're serious about it, it's got to be something that is demonstrated as a no-go zone at all levels throughout the organisation, starting at the very top. That's where the cultural impact is going to actually make most of its difference.
Absolutely. Joydeep, look, very, very important topic. Thank you.